Safe and sound at home again. Let the waters roar, Jack. Safe and sound at home again. Let the waters roar, Jack. Long we've tossed on the rolling main. Now we're safe ashore, Jack. Don't forget your old shipmate. Folly, rolly, 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 rido.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Right Now Show. I'm your host Jack Cunningham. Today we have a very special interview. The Republican nominee for the state representative of the 3rd Plymouth District, Kristen Arute. Hello, great to see you.
Hi Jack, thanks for having me.
So Kristen, let's start talking about some of your issues. One of the major issues you're talking about is taxes. Now, of course, Americans have a strong feeling about taxes. It's money that we use, we spend it towards government things like our industries and stuff, our infrastructure. What do you want to do with taxes? Do you want to lower them? Do you want to bring them up? If you bring them up, what causes would they go towards?
Well, Governor Baker is currently working toward decreasing our income tax, bring it back down to 5%. We're very close. That's a goal that he set for his administration, and he's doing a great job with that. I am in favor of maintaining and or reducing the taxes that citizens have to pay. I think that there are more practical ways that we can approach our budget. I think we need to be cutting spending, cutting waste.
Okay.
So I am in favor of reducing or eliminating taxes.
Yeah. Right. Now, with taxes, what is sort of the plan to bring it down? Like, what would we replace that money with? Like, where would this money come from? Or is it just being wasted right now for the usage of just like things that don't really get done?
I think there's a lot of wasteful spending.
Okay.
And I think that's one place that can be examined as opposed to automatically imposing a tax or a tariff or a fee, or not tariff, but a tax or a fee on small businesses and on residents of the Commonwealth. So.
Okay. Now, let's move on to a different issue you were talking about, education for children.
Mm-hmm.
What is your current thought about our current education system in public schools?
Well, Massachusetts is known to be the leader in the country in terms of education. There are some issues, as you know, about Common Core.
Yep.
Issues revolving around the standardized testing, the use of standardized testing, the purpose, the excessive amount of standardized testing, and the impact that it has on families and schools and administration. So I think that we need to be taking a really hard look at standardized testing in particular.
Mm-hmm.
I think we also need to be really practical in terms of our assessment of the Common Core standards.
Yep.
Evidence has shown that Common Core standards, since its implementation, have actually brought scores down in the Commonwealth.
Right.
We actually led the country with our previous standards. So I think we need to take a long, hard look at the direction that we're going.
Yeah, right. Now, you talk about standardized testing. Do you want to remove standardized testing or just like decrease it?
I think we're going overboard in terms of standardized testing. I think the benefit to standardized testing is minimal. The results that the school systems get after the standardized tests are implemented are really of very little use.
Yes.
It's also extremely time-consuming.
It is.
It's a stress inducer.
Yep.
And it's also costly to school systems. So I think that we need to make sure that we're not going overboard with standardized testing.
I completely agree with what you're saying, by the way, from personal experience. But however, we do have to bring up the point that a lot of colleges use standardized testing as a way to gauge sort of the intelligence factor, I suppose, for when they want to bring in students, like how well they achieve in certain subjects like math, science, English. If we get rid of standardized testing, or at least decrease it, would it still be around for the college use, or would we just only do it like one test per year or something like that?
I don't have a specific plan in mind, but
Okay.
I do think that having a standardized test every year for children, starting in grade 3, we have students being tested every year in math,
Yep.
every year in ELA. Science is next. Social studies will follow. Then we'll have foreign language tests.
Right.
And before you know it, the entire school year is going to be consumed with standardized testing as opposed to teaching. So there's definitely a time and place for standardized testing. You just presented a very practical application for it. SAT scores and ACT scores have always been beneficial to colleges and universities in assessing future students. So there's definitely a time and a place for it, but I think we're going to an extreme that we don't need to.
Okay, that's fine. All right, and what about one of the up-and-coming forms of education for public schools is charter schools, which, for those who don't know, it's basically taxes paid for the school. However, it doesn't follow the common curriculum that the state or government presents. Are you in favor of these charter schools and sort of the way they present education?
I was a sub at the South Shore Charter School in Norwell, which started in Hull.
Yeah.
So it started in our district. And I worked there for 2 years. They do a fantastic job at that school. They draw from all different populations, all different communities on the South Shore and beyond, actually.
Yep.
So yes, I'm in favor of parental choice for education for children.
Yeah.
I think that parents should be able to decide what types of environment, what type of school environment best works for their children and be able to pursue that. So yes, I'm in favor of charter schools.
All right. And one of the other things you talked about in your issues is elderly affairs, sort of. Unfortunately for some of our elders, some of them get swindled by new scammers today, especially with the increase in technology. It's becoming harder and harder for people basically to protect some of their interests, such as their bank account, their money, stuff like that. What are sort of your plans to prevent some of the elderly who may not be as experienced with this new digital age to protect them from being swindled and stuff like that?
Well, I'm currently working with an elderly woman with Alzheimer's who was defrauded by her financial advisor.
Yep.
I've been working with her for 2 years. I manage her personal, legal, and financial affairs.
Okay.
And during the course of seeking restitution for her, the attorney on the case has apprised me of ways that we can tighten up our elder abuse statute.
All right.
Currently, we have good laws on the books for protecting seniors from physical abuse, but we need much better laws to protect seniors from financial abuse. And there are very specific, very clear ways that we can do that. New Hampshire passed some legislation about a year ago that was very effective. Of course, Florida has some great laws on the books due to their demographic. So that's something that I feel very strongly about and something that I feel comfortable walking in and doing on day one.
Yep. All right, cool. Another issue that we're sort of happens in common day society, we have a bit of an opium problem going on right now, things like marijuana usage, heroin overdoses. And one of the questions coming up in this upcoming election is, should we legalize marijuana for certain states such as Massachusetts? A lot of people are saying that this is going to be passed through and that it will be legalized. What are your thoughts on marijuana in general and just should it be legalized?
Well, just to make a distinction, the medicinal use of marijuana has been legalized.
Yes.
Marijuana itself, possession has been decriminalized up to a certain amount. So those are steps in the right direction, I believe, especially in terms of medicinal use of marijuana. I am opposed to the recreational use of marijuana, in particular the way this bill is written. There are some real issues that would be presented both in terms of law enforcement, packaging issues, exposure to children, and confusion there, and potential overdoses. I know that California and Colorado have been dealing with their own very real issues. So the interesting thing about this industry is that the majority of the money that's supporting and coming behind the question, in favor of this question, is coming from that industry, the marijuana industry from Colorado. They see this great booming business. They want to have that same business model set up here in Massachusetts. But public safety is a very real concern. In particular, given what you mentioned with opioid usage and marijuana potentially being a gateway drug for children and that sort of thing.
Right. All right. Thank you very much. And what are some of the issues on the South Shore we're facing right now that you seek to change?
Well, something that's a very real concern on the South Shore is the issue of coastal flooding. And our infrastructure, crumbling seawalls. There are communities in our district, Hull is one, North Scituate is the other, that face very real issues when it comes to
Right.
effects of storms. So there are some things that make it a rather complicated issue, and there are some things that we can be creative with. One of the issues that we have in addressing coastal flooding and restoring our infrastructure
Right.
is very old deeds that are on the books. So, for example, with seawalls, you have people who own property that's on the coast, and based on the way their deed is written, they are actually responsible for the ownership of a particular section of seawall.
Right.
So they'd be responsible for maintaining it and replacing it and that sort of thing. So that makes it a little bit more complicated. The other thing is that, you know, we have state agencies, we have town agencies, we have the Army Corps of Engineers, and they all sort of point fingers at each other as to who needs to take responsibility for
right.
cleanup after a storm and helping the residents get back on their feet. Senator O'Connor has done a really fantastic job in reaching out to local communities to find out the kinds of things that are on their wish list in terms of the way that the state can help provide funding to their top priorities. And one of the things that he's done recently is approve funding for, or obtain funding for a watering unit that can actually be owned by communities in the district, used by the fire department, a local fire department that can go around and after storms can help clean up the streets from any coastal flooding, water overflow, that sort of thing. Another thing that we can look into is drainage issues and putting money toward improving drainage in those areas that are most affected by coastal storms.
Yep. And before we move on, we're going to go in a broader scope. Are there any other issues that you just want to address to the audience?
Well, I ran a small business for 13 years, and one of the things that I've been talking about with people as I go door to door and also in a candidate forum setting is the fact that government overreach and government overregulation can squelch the growth of small business.
Yeah.
I ran a daycare preschool business out of my home for 13 years.
Yep.
And I learned firsthand about how when government steps in and overregulates an industry, not only does it place a chokehold on the amount of growth that you can experience, but it also imposes certain costs on businesses that are then passed on to consumers. So that's something that I feel very strongly about as well. And Governor Baker has done a fantastic job cutting out unnecessary, unwieldy regulations. And I think that we're making some great strides in that direction.
All right, wonderful. All right, let's take a broader look at the government in general. We're currently going in an election year, of course, between the two candidates, the Republican nominee Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, the Democratic nominee. What are your thoughts? First, let's look at Donald Trump. He's had an interesting campaign. His supporters love him. Of course, those who don't love him are somewhat against him. What are your thoughts on him?
On him as a candidate?
Yes.
Well, I'm the Republican nominee for the 3rd Plymouth District state rep. I'm also obviously a registered Republican and have been my entire voting life.
Right.
As such, I am voting for Donald Trump. He is the Republican nominee for president.
Okay.
In doing a compare-contrast between the two candidates, well, as you know, last night was the second debate.
Yes.
I believe that his stances on issues coincide best with mine as well. So in addition to him being the Republican nominee, I do believe that he has stances that resonate with me. I do believe that he has solutions that are practical solutions. I'm hearing nothing from Hillary Clinton but Trump bashing, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I haven't heard anything practical. She's had 30 years in office, 30 years in the public eye, and quite frankly, she has a very poor track record. So,
all right. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, that was a good insight on the two candidates. Let's move on to sort of, our country's going through a bit of an issue right now between police brutality in some areas, of course, let's just specify, it's not all areas of the country, and the African American communities. Do you feel that African Americans are unjustly represented, or do you think that it's only in certain areas that we're having these issues, and that those are the areas that need to focus down and get their police force in check?
Well, I think that discrimination certainly is a reality.
Yep.
There's no question. Whether it's to the extent that the media portrays it is up for grabs.
Okay.
There's a lot of crime that is underreported. There's a lot of quote unquote police brutality against other races that is not reported.
Yep.
There are a lot of statistics that are being skewed to portray this issue to be bigger than it actually is.
Yep. Okay.
I think it's also unfortunately painted the police force in a very negative light. The actions of 1, 2, 3 do not represent the actions of the whole. I have a tremendous amount of respect for our law enforcement. They put their lives on the line every day for us.
Yeah.
They do a tremendous job in terms of public safety. And I think anything that places them in a negative light in an unnecessary way, whether it's the actions of one or the spin of the media, is unfortunate.
Yep.
And I think the repercussions are unfortunate. I do believe that discrimination does exist. Does it exist to the extent that the media has portrayed it? I don't believe so.
Yep.
And I believe the statistics demonstrate that it truly doesn't.
Okay. One of the other major issues going on right now is this immigration policy where people are saying that basically we have no borders right now. People are coming in from all areas of the world, and that there are so many illegal people here that we don't have recorded. Being that you're supporting Trump, do you support his policies on immigration where we're basically going to close down borders and find more legal ways that people can come into the country?
I absolutely believe that we need to crack down on illegal immigration, and it's not a racist issue.
Yep.
It's an issue of law.
Yep.
I think that one of the two things that make it challenging. One is that sometimes it's difficult to properly vet people coming from other countries. And the other thing is that we do need to be, and we are, a compassionate nation. So in terms of accepting refugees who are coming from a nation in crisis, that's a very real issue. And that's something that we, as Americans, take very seriously. However, I think that currently we are not being as proactive as we could be.
Right.
The interesting thing about this whole concept of a wall is that it's been batted around for a long time. As a matter of fact, not too long ago, Hillary Clinton was talking about how she was in favor of a border wall.
Yep.
And Bill Clinton actually proposed it when he was president. So I think they used the term fence as opposed to wall, but still, it's an issue that's a very real issue. It's a public safety issue, especially in light of the growth of ISIS and terrorism around the world and in our country. So absolutely, we need to take it seriously.
All right, now let's move on to more personal level. Let's get to know you a bit and your personality. When did you first get into politics? Why did you run for this campaign?
I was campaign manager for a friend of mine, Kay Proshma, who ran for school committee in Hingham.
Yeah.
That was back in the spring. And had been actively involved in the Hingham Republican Town Committee for a little while now.
Yeah.
When Garrett Bradley stepped down and this seat opened up, there was discussion, as you can imagine, among the town committees about who would run, who would be the nominee.
Yeah.
And I was asked to run. Mm-hmm. I never considered myself a candidate. I do not have a political background. I had no political aspirations. But I was asked to run, or to consider running. I did, and in the process of properly vetting myself as a candidate, especially given the short amount of time that I had, I came to the conclusion that I do have a pretty strong, pretty varied background in terms of education, elder affairs, running a business, being a mom, experiencing college education with my kids, home ownership,
of course,
rental property management, that sort of thing. So a pretty varied background that I felt I could bring to the table and would make me a qualified candidate. So there was a very short window of time in which I had to make that decision, and I felt comfortable making that decision, and since then I've hit the ground running, and I've really, really enjoyed it. Much more than I ever expected to.
Yeah. So you've had no background in politics, so this is your first time running for any role?
Yes, so I ran, my first time running was running for the primary, obviously, and won the primary. I'll be on the ballot in November, which is why I'm sitting here with you.
Of course, yes.
So yes, it's my first time running.
Now, before politics, what was your career that you were doing beforehand?
Well, I have a degree in education.
Yep.
I worked for an educational software company for a number of years in marketing.
Okay.
I ran my home-based childcare preschool business for 13 years. I've been a math tutor for the past 13 years.
Yeah.
I worked as a remedial math instructor in the Norwell schools and in the Canton schools, working with small groups of children.
Yeah.
And most recently, for the past 2 years, as I mentioned before, have been managing the personal, legal, and financial affairs for an elderly woman.
Okay. Cool stuff. Now, let's talk about your personality a bit, your home life. Is there anything that you just want people to know about you in general, like you're the world's best mom or something like that?
Oh my goodness. I have no idea. That's so funny. You've sort of caught me off guard. I mean, I'm extremely proud of my children. My daughter graduated from the University of South Carolina 2 years ago. She lives in South Boston with every other 20-something-year-old on the South Shore, with 2 of her girlfriends from high school. She works as a web art director at Talbot's, and she's responsible for creating my campaign material. So I'm very, very proud of her. She's a very talented and lovely young girl. My son, I'm equally as proud of. He's a sophomore at Northeastern University. He is my campaign treasurer, along with my father. The 2 of them were working together to manage my finances for my campaign. I'm very proud of him as well. And I have a dog whom I adore. He's my 3rd child.
Yep.
My Rodney Harrison.
We all love dogs.
We all love dogs, yes. Meeting a lot of dogs on the campaign trail.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, cool. All right. Thank you very much, Christine, for being here. That was wonderful. I think we got to know you great. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for watching The Right Now Show. I've been your host, Jack Cunningham, and thank you for watching.